What is true power? Is it having the most money or the highest position? Or is power the ability to make others unable to imagine their success without you? Today's story takes us to medieval Venice, the golden heart of Mediterranean trade. We will witness how a young banking clerk transformed himself from a replaceable employee into an irreplaceable asset when all the established powers seemed unreachable. With a lesson he learned from studying human nature, he would develop a strategy to make the most powerful merchants completely dependent on his unique services. This story will reveal the most sophisticated secret of influence, a secret discovered 600 years ago, but still used by the most successful companies and leaders in today's competitive world. It is not those who serve others who hold real power, but those who make others need them so deeply that their success becomes impossible without continued partnership. In the marble halls of medieval Venice, where gondolas carried secrets through moonlit canals and every palazzo whispered tales of commerce and conspiracy, there lived a truth more valuable than all the gold flowing through the Rialto markets. In a world where power shifts like the tides, the one who makes others need them becomes the one person who can never be discarded. For when princes and merchants, nobles and artisans all find themselves unable to function without your unique services, you transform from a mere participant in their world into the indispensable foundation upon which their success depends. The year was 1389, and Venice had reached the height of its power as the bridge between East and West. A maritime empire where fortunes were made and lost on the shifting currents of international trade. Within the labyrinthine world of Venetian politics and commerce, a young banker's clerk named Marco Grimaldi faced a challenge that would test not only his financial acumen, but his understanding of the invisible threads that bind human ambition to human need. At 28, Marco possessed the technical skills that marked him as competent in the complex world of Venetian banking. He understood currency exchange, had mastered the intricate bookkeeping methods needed to track transactions across multiple nations, and possessed the kind of analytical mind that could spot discrepancies in the most convoluted financial arrangements. But in the cutthroat world of Venetian commerce, where established banking families controlled access to the most profitable opportunities, technical competence was merely the entry fee to a much more sophisticated game. The problem Marco faced was both simple and seemingly insurmountable. The great banking houses of Venice, the Medicis, the Contarinis, the Mocenigos, had built their power over generations, creating networks of dependency that extended from humble craftsmen to foreign princes. Their clients didn't just use their services. They had become so reliant on their unique capabilities that switching to competitors was practically impossible. Meanwhile, Marco found himself relegated to routine clerical work, processing transactions for clients who barely acknowledged his existence. The opportunity that would change everything came in the form of an apparently routine assignment. Marco was tasked with managing the accounts of several smaller merchants who traded in specialized goods, rare spices, exotic textiles, and luxury items that required extensive knowledge of foreign markets and complex international relationships. These clients were too small to warrant the personal attention of senior bankers, but too profitable to ignore entirely. What Marco discovered as he studied these accounts was that the merchants faced a common problem that none of the established banking houses had bothered to address. They needed not just financial services, but comprehensive support for managing their international operations. They struggled with currency fluctuations, had difficulty verifying the reliability of foreign suppliers, and often found themselves at a disadvantage in negotiations because they lacked detailed knowledge of local market conditions in distant cities. The traditional approach would have been to simply process their transactions and leave them to solve these problems on their own. But Marco recognized an opportunity to create something entirely new. A service that would make him not just useful to these merchants, but absolutely essential to their continued success. Marco began by offering to research market conditions in the foreign cities where his clients conducted business. Using Venice's extensive network of trading posts and diplomatic contacts, he gathered information about local prices, political conditions, and business customs that his clients couldn't obtain anywhere else. But rather than simply providing this information as a one-time service, Marco structured it as an ongoing intelligence operation that became more valuable the longer clients used it. The brilliance of Marco's approach lay not in any single service he provided, but in how he designed those services to create increasing levels of dependency over time. Each piece of information he gathered was connected to previous intelligence in ways that made the overall picture more valuable than any individual component. Clients who used his services for a few months found that they had access to insights and opportunities that were simply unavailable to competitors who relied on traditional banking relationships. More importantly, Marco structured his information in ways that made it difficult for clients to use effectively without his continued guidance and interpretation. He didn't just tell merchants what prices were being paid in Constantinople or Alexandria. He explained how those prices related to seasonal patterns, political developments, and currency fluctuations that affected the optimal timing and structure of their trades. Within 6 months, Marco's clients had begun to achieve remarkable success in their international operations. They consistently negotiated better terms than their competitors, avoided costly mistakes that trapped less well-informed merchants, and identified profitable opportunities that others missed entirely. But they had also become completely dependent on Marco's continued support for maintaining these advantages. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Merchants who had initially used Marco's services as a convenient supplement to their existing banking relationships began to structure their entire business strategies around the intelligence and support he provided. They made major decisions based on his analysis, timed their transactions according to his recommendations, and found that their profits were directly correlated to their level of engagement with his services. Marco's reputation for creating extraordinary results began to attract attention from larger and more influential clients. Wealthy merchants who had previously been loyal to established banking houses started to inquire about his services, drawn by stories of the competitive advantages he had created for his existing clients. But Marco was careful not to simply expand his services to accommodate demand. Instead, he used the growing interest to create even deeper levels of dependency among his core clients. He began to offer exclusive arrangements that provided his most valuable clients with intelligence and opportunities that were not available to others. These clients received advance warning of political developments that might affect trade routes, early access to information about new suppliers or markets, and preferential support for complex transactions that required extensive coordination across multiple jurisdictions. But the true genius of Marco's system was that these exclusive benefits came with corresponding obligations. Clients who received his most valuable services were expected to conduct all of their banking business through him, to provide information about their own operations that helped him serve other clients more effectively, and to make long-term commitments that made switching to competitors prohibitively expensive. The result was a network of relationships that became more valuable and more binding the longer they continued. Marco's clients didn't just use his services. They had integrated those services so deeply into their business operations that their continued success depended on maintaining their relationship with him. They had become not just customers, but partners in a system that created mutual dependency and shared success. The defining moment in Marco's transformation came when the Venetian government faced a crisis that threatened the entire structure of the city's international trade. Political upheaval in the Byzantine Empire had disrupted traditional trade routes, while new taxes imposed by French and German authorities threatened to make many Venetian operations unprofitable. The established banking houses responded to the crisis with traditional solutions, lobbying government officials, seeking diplomatic interventions, and waiting for political conditions to stabilize. But Marco's network of dependent clients provided him with something more valuable: real-time intelligence about conditions throughout Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean, combined with the flexibility to implement alternative strategies while his competitors were still trying to understand what was happening. Marco used this intelligence to identify new trade routes that bypassed the disrupted areas, alternative suppliers who could provide goods at competitive prices despite the political turmoil, and innovative financial instruments that protected his clients from currency fluctuations and political risks. Most importantly, he was able to implement these solutions quickly and effectively because his clients trusted his judgment completely and were prepared to act on his recommendations without the lengthy deliberations that paralyzed other merchant operations. The results exceeded even Marco's expectations. While many Venetian merchants suffered significant losses during the crisis, Marco's clients not only maintained their profitability, but actually expanded their market share as competitors struggled with disrupted operations. The success was so dramatic that it attracted attention from the highest levels of Venetian society, including members of the Council of Ten who recognized that Marco had become a strategic asset for the entire Republic. But the true measure of Marco's success was not just the profits his clients generated during the crisis, but how completely dependent they had become on his continued support. When the political situation began to stabilize and traditional trade routes reopened, Marco's clients discovered that they couldn't simply return to their previous methods of operation. They had become so accustomed to the advantages provided by Marco's intelligence network and strategic support that operating without these services felt like trying to navigate in darkness. More importantly, the success they had achieved during the crisis had raised their profile and expanded their operations in ways that made Marco's services even more essential. They were now conducting business in more markets, with more suppliers, and under more complex arrangements than ever before. The growth that Marco had helped them achieve had created new levels of dependency that were even stronger than the original relationships. Marco had accomplished something that few people in any era have managed to achieve. He had made himself not just useful, but irreplaceable to a growing network of successful and influential people. His clients didn't choose to use his services because they were convenient or cost-effective. They used them because their entire business model depended on capabilities that only Marco could provide. This transformation extended beyond his immediate client relationships to influence the broader structure of Venetian commerce. Other banking houses began to study Marco's methods, trying to understand how a former clerk had managed to create such powerful bonds with influential merchants. Some attempted to copy his approach, but they discovered that the system he had built was not just a collection of services, but an integrated network of relationships that had taken years to develop and could not be easily replicated. The sophistication of Marco's approach became most apparent when established banking houses attempted to compete for his clients by offering better terms or more comprehensive services. These efforts consistently failed, not because Marco's terms were superior, but because his clients had structured their operations in ways that made switching providers extremely costly and disruptive. A merchant who had built his business strategy around Marco's intelligence network couldn't simply transfer to another banker without losing access to the information and insights that had become essential to his competitive advantage. A trader who had integrated Marco's analytical methods into his decision-making process couldn't easily adapt to different approaches without risking costly mistakes. Most importantly, clients who had become accustomed to the level of personalized support and strategic guidance that Marco provided found that other banking houses simply didn't offer comparable services. Marco had created what modern business theorists would recognize as switching costs. The idea that changing providers becomes more expensive than maintaining existing relationships, even when alternatives might seem attractive in theory. But he had done this not through contracts or legal obligations, but through the much more powerful mechanism of genuine value creation that became indispensable over time. The network effects of Marco's system also created barriers to competition that went beyond individual client relationships. Merchants who worked with Marco gained access to opportunities and information that came from his other clients, creating a community of mutual benefit that competitors couldn't easily replicate. New clients were attracted not just by Marco's individual services, but by the prospect of joining a network that provided ongoing advantages in market access, supplier relationships, and strategic intelligence. By 1395, Marco had transformed from a junior banking clerk into one of the most influential figures in Venetian commerce. But his power was based on an entirely different foundation than that of traditional banking families. While the established houses relied on accumulated wealth, political connections, and inherited relationships, Marco's influence came from his position at the center of a network of dependencies that he had carefully constructed over several years. His clients included some of the most successful merchants in Venice, but they were successful precisely because of their relationship with him. They had achieved levels of profitability and market dominance that would have been impossible without the advantages his services provided. But they had also become completely reliant on his continued support for maintaining those advantages. This dynamic gave Marco a form of power that was both more secure and more flexible than traditional approaches to influence. He didn't need to worry about political changes or economic downturns undermining his position, because his value to clients increased during uncertain times when his intelligence and strategic guidance became even more essential. He didn't need to compete on price or terms because his clients understood that the value he provided far exceeded the cost of his services. Most importantly, Marco's network of dependencies created its own momentum for growth and expansion. Successful clients attracted new opportunities that required additional services, which in turn created new forms of dependency and deeper integration. The system was designed to become more valuable and more binding over time, creating a virtuous cycle that reinforced his position at the center of an ever-expanding web of relationships. The long-term impact of Marco's approach extended far beyond his own career to influence the evolution of Venetian banking and commerce for generations. His methods demonstrated that sustainable competitive advantage came not from superior products or lower prices, but from creating relationships where clients became genuinely dependent on continued access to unique capabilities. Future generations of Venetian bankers studied Marco's techniques and adapted them to their own operations, creating a tradition of relationship-based commerce that emphasized long-term dependency over short-term transactions. The understanding that the most profitable clients were those who couldn't easily switch to competitors became embedded in Venetian business culture and contributed to the city's continued dominance of Mediterranean trade. But perhaps most significantly, Marco had discovered principles of human psychology and organizational behavior that would later be rediscovered by modern management theorists and business strategists. His insight that people value most highly what they cannot easily replace or replicate anticipated fundamental concepts in economics, psychology, and strategic planning by centuries. When elderly merchants would ask Marco about the secret of his success, he would tell them about the importance of understanding that in a competitive world, the ultimate security comes not from being the best at what you do, but from doing things that others cannot easily duplicate or replace. Dependency, he would say, is not about control or manipulation, but about creating genuine value that becomes more important over time. When you help people achieve success they couldn't achieve without you, and when that success depends on capabilities that only you can provide, you transform from a vendor into a partner, from a service provider into an essential asset. In our modern world of global competition and rapid technological change, this medieval wisdom has never been more relevant. We live in an age where products and services can be quickly commoditized, where customers can easily switch between providers, and where sustainable competitive advantage has become increasingly difficult to achieve and maintain. The most successful businesses, professionals, and leaders of our time are those who have learned to apply the same principles that guided Marco over 6 centuries ago. They understand that lasting success comes not from being marginally better than competitors, but from creating situations where others become genuinely dependent on their unique capabilities and insights. This doesn't mean manipulating or exploiting people, but rather providing such extraordinary value that clients voluntarily structure their operations around continued access to your services. The most effective consultants become indispensable advisors whose insights are integrated into their clients' strategic planning. The most successful technology companies create platforms that other businesses build their operations around. The most valuable employees develop expertise and relationships that make them irreplaceable assets to their organizations. Whether you're building a business, advancing in your career, or developing professional relationships, the principles of strategic dependency remain as powerful today as they were in medieval Venice. Focus on creating value that becomes more important over time. Develop capabilities that others cannot easily replicate, and build relationships where your success and your client's success become genuinely interdependent. For in the marble halls of Venice, Marco Grimaldi learned that the greatest power comes not from controlling others, but from making yourself so valuable to their success that they choose to structure their lives around continued access to what you provide. And in that understanding lies a timeless secret of influence. When you become essential to others' success, you transform from someone who serves their needs into someone whose own success becomes their priority.